Welcome back to episode 41 of the Locker Room podcast. Tonight I'm delighted to be joined by Mr. Dealey, not our boss and CEO, but the eldest of five brothers, Kieran's eldest brother, who is not only six brothers.
Yeah, sorry, Ross.
No, I've got that wrong already. Six brothers, eldest of six brothers, Not only the better looking one, but also the fittest I've heard as well, Mark.
Thank you.
do you agree to that?
I do actually, and we just always dismiss Kieran as the runt of the litter because he's the youngest of six. So we're all better than him in every way, and he just got bits and pieces of what we have. So and he got some opportunities that we should have had, but spoiled brat and all that. We could have a separate podcast on Kieran and how spoiled he is and indulged, but we won't, Ross.
We won't hang out in dirty laundry too much, but I would say it's five, so that says a lot now. Now it all starts to click into place. Mark, a different podcast for us today. I mean, you've just a bit of background. You've recently come on board with us at Daily Sports Science, and you're doing a lot of high intensity sessions online and giving virtual classes. And also you're quite a keen performer, triathlete and endurance sports performer. We're going to be looking at the triathlon in particular today.
Yes, it's something that's been a big part of my life, Ross, for maybe 15 years or so. I played sport all my life. I started out as a teenager as an athlete. I would have been a sprinter and a jumper. And then I would have played sports, and every sport needs somebody who's fast. So I was always thrown into soccer and Gaelic and hurling and rugby, where I could just run fast with the ball. And it was a huge advantage. And I kept it up. I kept it up until my late 30s or so. And meanwhile, I was teaching sports and outdoors. It's a big part of my job. And I was still playing soccer, I think, until my late 30s. I just tore my cruciate. I was trying to do one of those Cruyff turns in a pitch in wilds of West Kerry, and something happened and snapped, and that was it. And as part of my rehab, I just took up cycling. Somebody said, build up the muscles around your knee. And then I kept on cycling, and I found it was very, very successful for me. I did some running, and then somebody mentioned there's this thing called triathlon nearby. Why don't you give it a whiz? And that's it, really. That's how the story and the journey begins. I was never brilliant at triathlon. I'm still not brilliant. I'm very much middle of the road, but I really enjoy it. So it's something that we can talk about here. I think it's really exciting. It's something that we could roll out to members. Most people who are members of DSS are coaches or have a background in sports. And it's a very small leap from being interested and reasonably fit to taking part in something like a triathlon.
Brilliant. No, it's going to be really good to delve into your experiences and your journeys and stuff you've learned as well. So we'll talk about that, and we'll talk about obviously the training side of things and a bit of the science behind it, and give some advice. So really looking forward to today and something a bit different to what we've done before. But just before we go into it, Mark, I just want to say a mention about our sponsors, RIPT, who have come back on board with us. RIPT is a software platform built for performance coaches and organizations with easy to use programming tools and training load, well-being and nutrition monitoring via the RIPT app. All your coaching tools are in one place, streamlining your coaching, making it more accessible for your clients and athletes, and providing you with the insights you need to optimize performance. To find out more, please head over to www.ript, that's capital letters RYPT, .app, and use the code LOCKERROOM to get your 2 months free trial. We've used it a lot at Daily Sports Science. We're on the verge of bringing them in at QPR, although I can't announce that yet. They're fantastic, and I would highly recommend someone going and using them. A lot of good sport organisations across Ireland and now internationally are going with them. So great to have them on board. Okay, Mark, so you spoke a little bit about your journal there, your journey and how you got into it. Maybe speak a bit about your initial phase going into triathlons. Like, what did it look like? What sort of stuff did you have? And how you progressed over the years, I guess.
Okay. It's been my position 15 years ago when I just jumped in at the deep end, literally, to where I am now is radically different. I had very little equipment. I had very little knowledge. But I had enthusiasm, and I think that's something I bring to everything I do. So the enthusiasm I brought to turning up in West Kerry to do a triathlon, I wore a shorty wetsuit. It was something that I used for snorkeling. It was in no way suitable for swimming in the Atlantic, the colds of the Atlantic. It was enough for me to swim. I kept afloat. I had a bad bike. I hadn't spent much money on a bike. The bike was simply for rehab. It wasn't my interest in cycling. That came later. And in terms of running, I can't even remember. I had never heard of ASICs at that stage, whereas now everything is ASIC. So I had very basic equipment. I don't even know what kind of goggles. I probably got cheap goggles in the swimming pool. And somebody said, just turn up and swim out to that section. There's something out in the water there. Go out as far as that, turn around, come back in, get on your bike, cycle in that direction, come back, ditch the bike, ditch the helmet, and run as fast as you can, 2.5K, and turn around for 2.5K. So I did, and I was shattered. I couldn't swim, Ross. I was just one of these kids that I didn't really learn the breathing and the front crawl for swimming. And it's such a pity. I wish I had, obviously. My own kids have become very good swimmers because I think it's really important for them. I just used to breaststroke. So when I looked at the group, there was probably 40 to 50 people lined up on the sea, like looking out into waves as they're coming crashing in. And we were told 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Some of them looked like real triathletes. And then there was people like me, and people who were older, and just people who wanted fun. And then the other thing for triathlon is there's relays. So you can get a team of 3 to do a swim, bike and run. And so there was all kinds of people in the mix, and there was really lovely family atmosphere. My own kids were there on the day itself, my wife, I had friends around. We kind of celebrated during it and celebrated after it. I was a bit flaked out. I couldn't move much, but it was a brilliant experience because going into the open sea is a challenge. Like I know you swim, and I saw what you've done in the pool. You did a huge swim. You're training a lot for it, and that's brilliant. And I admire anybody who can do that. I find it really hard to swim in the pool, and it was kind of a different experience to go into the open water. There's a mental side to swimming in the open water because the fear can creep in. And once you start hearing the theme tune to Jaws, or when your foot touches off something and you start thinking it's definitely a shark, or it's a humpback whale, or an octopus or something, you have all these thoughts in your head. So like the really important thing is keep your focus, keep your mind. And so that was probably the biggest challenge for me at the time, was how would I go out into the water and swim and keep myself from losing it. There were safety kayaks out there in case something went wrong. And some things did go wrong for people. It's not for everybody. Sometimes the waves are too strong. Sometimes people just react badly to the overall experience. But I was lucky. I kept myself. And I wasn't fast. A breaststroke, you're not going to be very fast. And my breaststroke is not a good, I wouldn't have a great technique, but it was effective. I got through it, and then jumped on the bike, and I got through it. And then I continued the run, and I got through it. So that start, that was brilliant. And I had a couple of friends who did it as well at the same time. And all we did in the run up to it, forgive the pun, but in the run up to it, we were just talking, and we'd meet for kind of just to dip in the water. There was no drills. There was no swimming catch up and practicing speed work in the water. It was just, let's just get in the water and see what we can do. So a group of us did that a few times. And on the day itself, we all were successful. We all finished, which was an achievement. And that has led on to something very different. So the person who started triathlon 15 years ago and the person now is very different. I've accumulated a huge amount of knowledge and experience, and I've spent a fortune. The problem with triathlon, most people will tell you, a lot of people who get into it, they may not realize how much you spend, but it's nearly like an addiction because you see somebody else with a better bike. You start off with a mountain bike, and then you move on to an aluminium bike, and then you move on to an aluminium frame with a carbon fork, and then you go into a full carbon frame, and then you try bars, and you can spend loads of money, Ross, but it's still, I don't think you need that much equipment to enjoy yourself and to take part,
For sure.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, Mark, are you still doing breaststroke now?
No.
Okay.
No, Ross.
A hell of a swim, huh? That's a hell of a swim.
I have developed a kind of front crawl that's slightly unorthodox. It's unorthodox but very effective because I can move from point A to point B and not drown, but it's not very aesthetically pleasing. It's kind of nearly a half crawl and a half catch up.
Okay,
if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
You know,
well, effective.
It's effective. I have done coached classes in the pool. I've hated them. When I get into the water, all I look forward to is the clock running down the 45 minutes or so. I can see the clock when I'm turning. I'm watching the clock. I just can't wait till I'm finished. And then I get out and I say, yeah, that was really good. I enjoyed that. And I learned something. You know, I'm not a natural swimmer. Like I assume you learned when you were younger, you have all these things that come naturally to you. When you learn like an adult to do something like proper catch up, and you know your front crawl and bilateral breathing, you have 1,000 things in your mind working at the one time. So for me, when I'm trying to swim, I'm overthinking, and I just love to relax and I'd love to be languidly reaching out and stretching and grabbing the water and pulling it back and turning at the right time, you know. But like I certainly wouldn't want to put anybody off from doing triathlon. You do not have to be a good swimmer. You do not have to do front crawl. I saw somebody do backstroke once. I did a triathlon in South Kerry. We had to swim from the mainland over to an island. It was 750 meters. I was doing my thing, my front crawl, and I looked beside me and somebody was really beautifully backstroking. So you can do whatever you want, really. And as long as you reach your end point, that's fantastic. That's brilliant, you know?
No, that's brilliant, Mark. And just before we move on, by the time this would have gone out, your blog would have been posted on
Yes.
Science. So
hopefully, yeah.
The members, I think it's going out tomorrow, so it'll be in 4 days ahead of this podcast, I believe, 4 or 5 days. So that's brilliant, and that's kind of the basis of what we'll be going through today. So exclusive to members, if they want to read a bit more info on your experiences of the triathlon, we'll be touched on that today, but they can go over to the website and have a look. So Mark, let's take us through that then. So obviously you said things got a bit more expensive, but has that impacted your performance massively, like your knowledge around training and also equipment? Has that had a big impact on your success?
Yeah, like at that stage, I suppose there's two parts to that. One is training and one is equipment. In terms of training, I started to read and I joined a club. A club started roughly the same time. I have a local club in Tralee in County Kerry, and it's a very big club and a brilliant club, a lot of really good members. Triathlon is a different sport to other sports because you are an individual and you are competing against yourself, but you're also part of a community of participants. Everybody helps each other. It's very rare that you come across somebody who's so single-minded they're not open to helping or maybe giving a piece of advice. There are people there giving advice the whole time, and I really like that. I think that's really good. So we all learn from each other, and we would have trained together. So I learned things like interval training. It was new for me 15 years ago. It was just let's go out and run or let's go and cycle. And I've learned subsequently that, you know, just going out and cycling, in one way, it's just, they call it junk miles. It's not really doing much good for you. It's really enjoyable, and you can have a chat and you can stop for coffee and you look into people's gardens and you see the scenery if you're lucky enough to live near lovely scenery. But moving on from just long cycles and long runs, interval training was, I suppose, the start of an improvement. Now, again, I would say, hand on heart, I'm you know, very much in the middle, not somebody who's ever going to feature in top anythings in any races, but I compete and I like it. But my performance has definitely improved. I've looked at plans. I've incorporated plans into my training. When you plan ahead, like it could be 6 months, you sign up for something and you say, okay, I have 6 months. Maybe the first couple of months, I'll just get comfortable on the bike, or I'll get comfortable on the running, or work on my swim stroke, do some strength and conditioning. I suppose the challenge, Ross, really, I know I'm not really answering your question, but the challenge is to balance everything. Like if you want to improve, you can finish by just running, swimming, cycling. But if you want to improve, you have to look at types of training. You have to look at strength work, speed work, intervals, break sessions, they're very common in triathlon training, which is you cycle and you get off the bike and you run, because you have to get used to it. Yeah. And even I know you it's something we, in our discussions and over and back, You were talking about in training, do you do the 3 events and at the 3 disciplines at the one time? Yes, you do. Actually, it's very good practice, because when you're looking at you know yourself, you're a sports scientist. You're using different muscles, different parts of your body. There's different combinations going on depending on what discipline you're using. You have to learn how to pace yourself. You don't want to blow up, and it's very easy to blow up if you're not looking after your nutrition on the bike or so. You may blow up and you won't be able to finish your run. So it's really important that you practice your brick sessions, which are the cycle run, and then the 3 disciplines as well. So you want to be able to finish.
Yeah.
So that's like in terms of the reading I've done. A club is brilliant. Friends are brilliant. You learn from each other. The internet is a fantastic resource. You'll find anything you want on the internet. There's loads of coaching groups out there. You can do online coaching as well. So that's one side, training. And then the other is your equipment. And like I kind of was joking about the bikes, but you do end up spending more money on your bike. And if you think about whatever distance you're doing, you spend most time on the bike. So that's where you should spend most of your training, really. You can make time on the bike. And obviously the easiest way to make time on your bike is by buying a better bike. And we're lucky in Ireland that we have a bike to work scheme. I think you have a bike to work scheme in England, don't you?
Yes, there is something there.
Something, yeah. But here, like if you look around, everybody has bikes, and everybody has good bikes, road bikes, and everybody, a certain amount then of triathlon specific bikes, and I've spent money on them, and they do make a difference. Once you learn how to clip in your pedals. I have my bike here beside me. I call her my princess, and she takes pride of place. There's no way she'd ever be allowed to spend the night in a shed. She's in the house. Fair but play. With being clipped in, that in itself is learning to be comfortable on a bike and learning to have the confidence to clip your pedals in, because accidents happen, unfortunately.
Yep.
Like you can spend loads of money, Ross, on better runners. You can have gait analysis. And people will tell you that you underpronate or overpronate, and hence you've got to buy certain trainers. You spend a lot of money on that. You can, I'm just trying to think, your wetsuit, you can spend a lot of money on your wetsuit. You're looking at a swimming specific wetsuit. Your goggles, you want to make sure that you have goggles that don't leak. I've many a time gone to training sessions in the sea where my goggles leak, and there's nothing as bad as salty water going in your eye. There's nothing you can do. Your session is over effectively. So when you turn up to start a triathlon, you want to make sure that your goggles don't leak. You're ready to take part in your event. So equipment, it's easy to spend money, but you don't necessarily have to spend loads of money. You can still have a great time, And I think I talked in the blog, I mentioned 3 different types of people who take part. And one is the person like me 15 years ago. I just want to tick this box. I don't really know much about what this is, but I want to tick the box. I want to say I've done a triathlon. Then type 2 is the person like me who stuck with it for so many years. The country is full of people like me. We've spent money on the better bikes and gone training, learned our interval training, subscribed to plans, had coaches, gotten open water, sea coaching, but have had a whale of a time, a really unbelievable time. And then there's the elite. And those people are, I just say hello to them whenever I see them, and they just pass me by. If we're doing 2 laps on a cycle, I'm doing my first lap and they're on their second lap, and so I just wave to them, and they're different. You recognize them a long way away. They have really fancy gear, they look really lean, and they don't really smile to you because they're folk. That's a waste of energy when they're taking part, But,
maybe that's a tip for you next time. Don't smile to anyone.
There was one event I did a long time ago that nearly killed me, and halfway through it was a half Ironman distance, and about halfway through it, I just reached the depths of despair. I said, I am never doing anything like this again. I'm mad. I have a family at home. I live in a beautiful place. I have friends and family extended. I could be off holidaying and having fun and sitting back having a beer in the sun. And here I am. I'm actually paying to torture myself. That's a long distance. But by the end, when I crossed the finish line, within 5 minutes, I was thinking, so next year, this is what I'm going to do. But one of the things I did at the end, I said to myself, I actually wasted a lot of time because I saluted a lot of people when we were running circuits. So there's little things that you can do to kind of save time and be faster, you know.
For sure.
But one other thing, and I know we're a bit all over the place on this, Ross, in one way. We're not really following the script, but there's one thing that is really important. I suppose I just touched on it there, is the mental aspect. Mm-hmm. Because you can train your body, but in a sense, you have to train your mind as well. And depending on the distance you're doing, you can suffer, and your mind can tell you, give up, give up, give up, give up. You know, just stop or walk. Even when you're running and you see a hill, you know, your mind is saying to you, just stop, take it easy, opt out. Just jump in the car and drive to get a lift, go to the finish line. In a way, I actually like a lot of individual training. I like to do my own thing as well. I love training in group, but I also like to train by myself, because in a sense, I'm training myself to be in an event. And I have little mantras that are going on in my head. I have little mementos that I carry with me. And if ever I hit a dark place on those longer distances, I kind of touch the bracelet that my family gave me, or I, you know, touch my heart, you know, thinking about the people that are close to me or whatever. And it's really important, because you undoubtedly in a longer distance triathlon will kind of suffer, and this knock is in your head saying, just, you know, give up. Yeah. So that's why I like individual training as well. And sometimes the more boring the training it is, you know, in a place that's just in a straight, in Tralee, there's a place that's 1 mile, it's very straight, just a pathway. And I love to train on that, because it's just so boring.
Yeah.
In order to help me be ready for an event, you know?
Yeah, that's a great point, Mark, because I think a lot of endurance sports, or people that do endurance sports, will suffer that at some point. I know I have with running and swimming, but it's not spoke about much, I don't think.
No.
So very important that you train it, yeah. And do you think you've got better over the years with dealing with that negative?
I have, yeah. Like, I suppose I'm quite lucky in the job that I do, that I'm quite open. I have to be quite open to kind of looking deep within myself. Like, I suppose when I was a much younger man, you know, when I was growing up, people didn't talk about their feelings and didn't talk about what they thought about themselves. And things have changed radically. You know, there's a huge spirit of openness and talking, and people say it's okay not to be okay. And I would freely acknowledge that, you know, at different times in my life, I would have had some times where I doubted myself, and life would have been challenging. You know, we all reach different milestones in our life that are amazing, but you can also reach little things that are more like dips, and you just have to get over them, and you have to equip yourself to get over them. I'm very lucky. I've been trained to kind of help myself, and I feel it's really important, and it has definitely helped me in the events, the longer distance, any events that I have done. You know, so I joke that I'm 5 minutes after I finish, I'm ready to sign up for next year, but it's actually true. You know, you just have to give yourself the tools to kind of help yourself, and then, you know, by the time you finish, you've kind of forgotten the pain. You know.
For sure. Well, you can see your passion and love for the sport, so that oozes through. So
yeah, I know. I think it's brilliant, Ross. And like, I suppose just touching upon the blog, like, Ireland is full of people who've taken part in sport and taken part in activities, and more recently Bike to Work scheme, and people are running and walking, and there's a knowledge of health and an awareness that we need to keep active. And something that's touched my own family and my wife's family recently is, you know, even the issue of dementia. And one of the keys to helping to offset the onset of dementia is being active. And we're living longer, so we need to be active, and we also need to be social. And in my eyes, like, I'm trying to do my bit to keep going as long as I can, because I know I think it's going to help me in the long run, you know. Sure. Being social and making friends and doing activities with other people, but also being physically active. And, you know, I suppose just to bring it down to the nuts and bolts for DSS members, it's quite easy actually to do one of these events. It's not that difficult. I definitely, you know, I'd like to debunk the myth. You don't be bothered looking at the people with the fancy sunglasses and helmets and bikes, and the people who are running really fast that you see all around the country, or the people that swim way out in the open water. a little bit of training and a little bit of enthusiasm and a certain level of fitness, and anybody can take part in an event like that. I genuinely don't think it's beyond anybody. I think if you're anyway active, 6 weeks and would get you ready for a triathlon event. I wouldn't like to think that people would be put off by it.
For sure. Really good advice. Just quickly then, Mark, because you went through some loads of stuff there. Just rein it back a little bit.
Sorry.
No. It's fantastic. Please go off on any tangent you want. In terms of the actual formats and the different distances then, if someone wanted to get into it, but you got the sprint distance, I think.
Actually, even before that, Ross, and it's something that has come up quite a lot. If you, like Triathlon Ireland have their own website, if you look at that, they have a calendar of events. And so they put on the main events all across the country, and they also specify which distance. Now, there are 4 main distances, but even before the 4 main distances, there's something called a super sprint or try, or there's different names for it. So you can be brought down to, your swim might be 300 meters, your bike might be 10K, and your run might be 3K. Okay. Which are all very, very manageable. Again, if you're comfortable in the water, you could do it today. I genuinely think that. Then you move onto the sprint distance. And this is what most people do. This is 750 meters of a swim, 20K on the bike, and 5K on the run. Now, when I talk about the open water and the sea, a lot of triathlons take part in rivers and lakes and the odd canal as well. So it's not just the open water and the sea. And I'm well aware that when people think about the sea, they think, oh, we've got to go way out, and that's really scary, and there could be sharks, and there's man-o'-war jellyfish. In all cases, Triathlon Ireland makes sure that all triathlon clubs, when they're organising a triathlon, adhere to certain safety and regulations, and they've safety officers and people in kayaks looking after your safety. So you can have that initial distance, and they can be in the lake or river or sea. Then you move up your standard distance is an Olympic distance. There's 1,500 meters, 1.5K, 40K bike, and 10K run. And that's what you'll see in the Olympics. They call it the Olympic distance. That's the Brownlees. If you ever see what they've done in the Olympics, that's their actual event. Then you move up to half Ironman, but you can't really use the Ironman name because Ironman is a company who'll sue you if you use the name, even though that distance is there. You're talking about 1.9K swim, you're talking about 90K bike, and you're talking about 21.1K runs, half marathon to finish. And then you move up to the long distance, full distance, the Ironman itself. And you have to breathe in when you think about this, because it's 3.8K swim, 180K cycle, and a full marathon, or I think it's 42.2K, or is it 43K? I have it down as 42.2K. So that in itself, like you certainly wouldn't dream about doing a half Ironman or an Ironman without doing at least a sprint distance. The odd time I read on social media, I see people saying, oh, I've signed up for a full Ironman next year. I've never done any triathlon before. Well, firstly, they shouldn't be allowed to do anything, because it's steps of the stairs. You have to progress. You have to start at the basic. You have to see, do you like it? Maybe it's just not for you. Maybe you go into the open water, whether it is the sea or the river or the lake or the canal, and maybe you just don't feel comfortable swimming. Maybe you don't feel comfortable swimming beside other people. Like, I don't know if you've ever done boxing or any martial art. If you do triathlon, you do martial arts, because basically everybody starts together in the water, the whistle goes, and you all might be spread out quite wide, and you're all aiming towards one particular buoy to swim to the left of that buoy, and you're all converging. So what you're doing is you're actually fighting against people, all stuck together. So, you can end up with a bloody nose or a gash on your head, or, somebody's large toenail comes back against you and scratches you on the top of your forehead. It's brutal. It can be brutal. What I do, I actually stay at the back and I just let people off, because I know I'm not going to be up with those people, And if you are a good swimmer, and you want to do something like that, you can draft off people in the water, which is really helpful. Especially if you have a friend and you're swimming together, you can take turns to draft off each other, and that will help you. You can't draft on the bike. There's triathlon I think I'm not sure whether it's Triathlon Ireland or the World Triathlon Organization, whoever that is. There's very strict rules governing triathlon. So you can't draft on a bike. You as you're approaching somebody, you have 10 meters, and basically you have to move out and you have to pass them by. And if I'm being passed out, I have to allow somebody to pass me by. I can't speed up myself. So they're very strict. They're also very strict about your transition. I suppose that's a discipline in itself. You have your swimming, you have your bike, and you have your run. The discipline of transition is something I should have mentioned. That's really, really important. You come out of the water, you have to take off your goggles and your hat and take off your wetsuit. You're wearing what's called a triathlon suit. It's usually a one piece that you'll then wear on the bike and the run. So you take off your wetsuit. Underneath it, your tri-suit is wet because the water has gotten into your wetsuit. Yeah. So it's a little bit uncomfortable, getting onto the bike initially. But once you address your bike, you have to have your helmet on your head. They're very strict about things like that. Yeah. You have a certain amount of, you put on your cycling shoes, you load up with your water, gels or bars or whatever, you put them in your rear pocket, and then you start on your bike. And when you're coming back then into the transition area to start your run, you have to dismount before a certain line. You have to keep your helmet on until you're ready to start your run. And then you go, so there's all kinds of little things. I mean, look, if we were to continue this, if we were to have another podcast, I could tell you 1,000,001 other things and extra things. We could be here for hours and hours. But, by taking part in one, you learn a huge amount. Yeah. And I suppose for most people, if they do one, most people will probably come back and think about doing another one. It's easy to get hooked and dragged in.
It sounds amazing. Just talk about the transition period then, because there's a big conception that going from like a horizontal swimming motion to coming out the water, that takes a bit of getting used to physiologically. People can feel sick and get on the bike.
Yeah.
How do you combat that? Is there anything? Is it just doing it more often? Like we speak about
just doing it more often, Ross. Yeah, and just realizing, like I sometimes, when you push yourself in the swim, you try. It's actually very hard to leave the water to step. If you're coming out of the water, it's very hard to keep your balance, and that's a real problem. And you're kind of very disorientated. Like if you think about it, I have to wear earplugs because I get water inside my ears that then comes out over the next few days. When you bend forward and the water is coming out. So I wear my earplugs. I can't hear much, and I'm very disorientated when I come out. You have to manage your hat, manage your goggles. You cannot get help taking off your wetsuit. So you have to be somebody who's able to reach behind. You have a long lead on it, reach behind and pull down your wetsuit, zip, and then take it off for yourself. Like the dizziness is there and the disorientation, and yet you've got to take off this wet suit and pull it down over your body, then over your legs, and you're trying to get it over your heels. And at the same time, you're thinking, I have to continue. I want to beat my friend Brian because he's taking part as well. I want to beat him, and it's this, you're push, and yet you're physically not able to do it. It can just take a few seconds. Practice makes perfect. The other transition then, Ross, is when you're coming from the bike to the run, and they call it jelly legs because you're spinning on your bike. And you find it hard you park your bike, take off your helmet, take off your cycling shoes, put on your running shoes, and then you're gone. That happens very quickly. And for some people, they get jelly legs and they're wobbly and they don't have control over their legs. Yeah. And then you're breathing because you're kind of disorientated by the whole occasion as well. There's crowds around and maybe the weather is really hot or maybe it's raining. Rain doesn't cancel an event. Mm-hmm. And it's a challenge as well. Now what I like to do is I actually like to spin a lot in the last maybe half K before the finish of the cycle. I'm not sure how true this is, but somebody a long time ago told me, and in my head it works, you may have built up a lot of lactic acid by spinning around at a high cadence as you're coming up towards your dismount line, maybe for 500 meters or 300 meters, you're trying to get rid of it, then you should be able to find it easy to run off the bike. I don't know, but I think everybody has different ideas. Everybody has different tips. Everybody has different strategies. So I suppose they're the two big myths that people have,
And talk about the mental side, coming into the run where your legs feel like that and you've got 5K, 10K to go, like it's easy for your mind to tell you straight away, you can't do this. Like
you can't do that. Yeah. You know? And you just literally want to get your way through. If you're wearing a heart rate a strap and you're looking at your heart rate, you might find yourself after coming off the bike, your heart rate is flying. You're up in, they call it in the red, like, and you're thinking, how will I get this? How will I find my rhythm? How will I manage my heart rate to bring itself down so that I can actually run the 5K or even the 10K? And of course, we all want to sprint at the end to finish because we all want to think that we're like, Usain Bolt as we come to the finish line, arms raised, and actually picking off somebody else who's also sprinting towards the line, So you want to do that. You don't want to walk across the line. You don't want to crawl across the line.
Yeah. For sure. Mark, just before we move on to the training side of things, and you gave us some great detail there. You spoke about having gels and bars. What sort of nutritional stuff have you learned over the years? Like not only just in race, but preparation around the race and training, and obviously you're burning a lot of calories in training, huh?
Yeah, I suppose I like to think that I have a fairly good diet. I look after myself in terms of food. I try and get a good few, good lot of good fats and protein, a certain amount of carbs. They talk about carb loading in the run up to an event. Yeah, it's a good idea. Get a huge amount of pasta for a few days before it. You definitely in your training, you want to be prepared. So what you're doing in your training should be much the same as you're doing in your event, because the last thing you want to do is try something different the night before an event and all of a sudden you're sick. The last thing you also want to do is try a new gel. And hand on heart, I've tried a new bar one day on a triathlon. My best friend Brian, he was doing the event with me, and he brought bars that I had never had before, and they were absolutely vile, and I couldn't eat them. So you have to practice your nutrition. You have to practice your hydration. Aside from rest, recovery, and all the other things. But at the same time, Ross, when I was 15 years ago, I had never heard of carb loading. I'd never heard of managing my foods. I don't remember, did I have a gel or did I have a bar when I was doing my event? I've taken part in some events, Ross, where on the longer events, they give you flat Coke and they give you sandwiches. And I've actually sat down and eaten a lot of sandwiches to kind of finish, because your body is actually crying out for something, depending on the distance, those longer events, you're consuming so much food because you're burning so many calories. And again, the fear that everybody has is, I do not want to burn up. I don't want to bonk, they call it, I'm sure you've come across it. That's the worst thing that can happen. So I manage my nutrition. I look after myself. I mostly eat good foods most of the time and most of the week. And so then I'm usually okay in the run up to it. I manage myself. And then on the day itself, gels, I'm trying to stick to gels that I've used, and also bars. And then, something like some of the longer distances, even granola, make my own granola, or what's the other thing? Brack. Yeah, fruit brack, So everybody has different things, but I would say it's not that big a deal. If you're looking at sprint triathlon, it's not really that important. Once you go up the distance, then you have to concentrate. The more the distance you do, the more you have to think about your nutrition,
Yep. No, really good advice. Thanks, Mark. Just before we move on, just want to shout out again to our sponsors, Ripped. Cormac and a gang have said, are you tired of the limitations using Excel and emailing to deliver programs? Yet potentially, Cormac, Ripped can help you simplify the creation and delivery of training programs, making it easier for you to provide everything for your clients and athletes, all their needs at a fingertip. With training load, well-being and nutrition monitoring, also, you get a full picture of you and your clients and athletes' performance. And again, please head over to rip.app and use the code LOCKERROOM to get your 2 months free. And as I said, we're very, very close to doing a deal with them to bring them into QPR Academy and giving all our players online programs as opposed to paper or emailing off. So very good service, very good, easy to use, and very well thought out. So yeah, please check that out, guys, if you're listening. Okay, Mark. So just going through a little bit around the training, you spoke quite a bit about training there, and we'll talk a bit about some of the topic points and different types of training and modalities you can do. But tell us a little bit about your training throughout the week. So what does it look like? How do you split it across the different disciplines? Obviously, you're a family man as well, and you're working, so it's keeping the balance.
Okay, I suppose hand on heart, Ross, what I would say about a plan is I have aspired to use a plan and follow a plan 100%. Every triathlon I've taken part in, and every duathlon, and every half marathon, and every swimming event, and hand on heart, I have never 100% followed a plan, because it's unless you have lots of time and the weather is really suitable, and that it's a plan is something you try and take and you incorporate it into your life. And obviously most DSS members, they're not 25-year-olds. They're mostly, they're a little bit older, and in all likelihood they probably have families and stuff like that. And once you have families, you guard and you mind your leisure time. You get what you can. So it's not always suitable. And if you're like my family, my own family live in one part of Ireland. My wife's family live in another part of Ireland, and I live in a separate part of Ireland. So we have a lot of traveling. So I can aspire to do the training in the correct way. It doesn't always work like that, and the weather, I live beside the sea. Sometimes it's amazing for swimming. It's flat calm, but sometimes it's wild. And I have been out in it, and it's like a washing machine. It's not that pleasant. So you have to pick and choose when you can. So to answer your question, the training should look like, you should be looking at 2 runs, 2 swims, 2 bikes, and maybe a brick session. Okay, it sounds ideal, but what you want to do is you want to do a longer, slower run, a longer, slower cycle, and a longer, slower swim. And for each of them, you also then want to incorporate some interval training. Basically, for something like what I'm doing at the moment, and maybe it's something we'll touch on later on. My event this week, I was doing some intervals yesterday. I think it was 4 by 4 minutes with 2 minutes off. Just that's a run. That's as much. You go hard as you can for 4 minutes, off for 2 minutes. Do it again. You repeat it 4 times. Yeah. And you do something similar on the bike. You might do something like 6 minutes this week, 4 by 6 minutes, with maybe 2 minutes or 3 minutes off. And this in the swim, you can do something like that. Your intervals are also drills. And like in an ideal world, I would be doing drills to improve my swim. It's easier to do them in the pool than in the open water, but at the moment the pools in Ireland are still closed. We have another 3 weeks, I think, before they open. So any drills that I'm currently doing, I'm trying to do them in the open water. Then I look at doing a brick session, which is simply a cycle and a run. They don't have to be particularly fast. You're just teaching your body, training your body to move and to manage your transition from bike to run. Yeah. Aside from that, then, Ross, because there's more to it than that, strength and conditioning. And can I just advertise the fantastic sessions that are on Wednesday evening? They're certainly really suitable for anybody who's active. I have found them unbelievably helpful. Hand on heart and touch wood. When you get a little bit older, as you're much younger than me, you're a chap in comparison to me, you need to manage your body and you want to remain injury-free. It's such a challenge, because once the injury happens, you're gone. Like I'm doing all my stuff, but I just know something I do tomorrow morning could twinge my back, and I'm not active for so long. So I do an awful lot of strength work, and I find it hugely beneficial. Obviously, as a man, and obviously as a man who's a little bit older, my back is a little bit tight and my hamstrings are very tight. So I spend a lot of time trying to manipulate my hamstrings to work better for me. So I do a lot of stretching. I do foam rolling and stretching and strength work. I can't tell you how many squats and lunges I've done and variations I've done, in particular over the last 6 months. I really went for it this winter. I said, this is something I want to concentrate on. So I would have been doing something like, at different times, maybe 4 to 5 sessions of strength work. That's before I hadn't gotten into a lot of the triathlon training sessions during the winter time. I kind of mainly concentrate on running. But so in an ideal world with your plan, you'd be doing morning and evening. And I think it's really important to not to do all your sessions in the evening time. Most of the events are in the morning time. So there's no point in you training in the evening time. And all of a sudden you rock up to your event on a Saturday that starts at 6 in the morning. I've done one event that was starting at 6, and it's, your body is not tuned into being so active at 6 o'clock in the morning. But it's also good for your mental break from the sport. If you're doing 2 training sessions a day, you're better off to 1 in the morning and 1 in the evening, and try and mix them. So ideal world: 2 swims, 2 bikes, 2 runs, and a brick session. And then outside of that, you can be doing your S&C, or your stretching, your foam rolling, yoga, Pilates. All good. I definitely highly recommend all those sessions.
It sounds a very good training program, Mark. Thank you very much.
Well, can I just say that, and I know you devised a training. We spoke last summer, do you remember? And you devised a training program, and it's brilliant. And you touch all the bases. I think if somebody really wants to go for a triathlon, a sprint triathlon, there's one ready-made on the DSS website. And it's perfect. It's fairly straightforward. And I don't think people should be intimidated by the idea of something like interval training. It's not going to challenge you that much. It's not going to radically knock you out completely. Very good you mentioned that, because on the website we've got obviously the sprint triathlon, and we've got various running programs and swimming programs that me and you have collabed over and spoke about. So there are options on there. Let's talk a little bit about the interval stuff and the long distance stuff, because you mentioned earlier about junk miles, but it is important that your body goes through the longer stuff to get to the distance required in training, right? I think that's exactly. So you do your long, slow stuff, and even physiologically, we say that's more peripheral adaptation. So taking the blood to the muscles and extracting the oxygen into the muscles. But the interval stuff's really good for intensity and also overloading central side. So VO2 max, maximum output for heart, and like you said, 4-minute intervals, 6-minute intervals, and you're really trying to raise the speed as much as you can in those intervals, aren't you? Yeah. And I suppose what you do notice, and I have done a lot of this now recently, is in your recovery, your heart rate comes down quicker. Over the week, you do get better. You recover quicker, and that's what you want to see. Like if you're watching your zones and stuff, you do need to see it. One of the things that I know you put terms on things that I do, and obviously that's your background. It's more intense in that direction, but like what I've been told is the reason we do the long slower is that you're teaching your body to use the fat as reserves when you're in an event for your run or your cycle. That's my interpretation. So that's why it is actually really important to practice slow. And depending on how much you go into it, like Don Fink is somebody now who's written the famous book for half Ironman and full Ironman. And anybody who starts his training, they all are perplexed and find it really difficult to follow this, what they call zone 2 training. And the zone 2 training is the really, really slow running. And people say, and I've tried it myself, and it can be very frustrating, I can actually walk faster. But you have to do it, and the results are there. Like you will find yourself with the same effort, you're actually faster, if you follow this. But that's a great point, Mark. I think there's 3 different types of training there. Really, you've got your zone 2 and your slower stuff, and even from like an efficiency point of view and economy perspective, you're teaching your body to become better at that skill that you're doing. Then you've got your longer distance race pace stuff, so actually trying to go for your 5K running at a good pace, and then you've got your intervals. And I think the differentiation between the two give you a nice physiology and a nice development, I guess, across the week. But it must be said that if people have only got 4 times a week to exercise, they can still do it. Even like you said at the start, when you said you just went off and swam, you went off and run, and you went off and cycled, and that would get you a good enough level. I think so, Ross. And I again, it's amazing. I come across loads of people who are into sport and very active, and I we get talking, and you say triathlon, and they say, I couldn't do that. I can't swim. And I think it's such a pity, because I like I said, you can do a breaststroke, and you could do a backstroke. You could nearly do a doggy paddle just in order to finish. And it's such a pity that people have it as an obstacle as to why they can't do a full event. And it's an amazing achievement. It's really, really rewarding. It's not that you're an elite athlete, but it's just really rewarding. and to become part of a community of people who are taking part in events like that. And, like I said earlier, we all like to be social, and it's really good for us. It's really, really, and certainly as you're getting older, being social and active at the same time is fantastic for you. But I just think, 4 sessions a week, you don't have to follow a plan that has your 2 different types of running, 2 different cycles, 2 different swims, your break, your strength and conditioning, your Pilates, your yoga, and you're managing your hydration and your nutrition. It's not that much of a stretch to just literally jump in if you can swim a little bit. A couple of weeks just being active, and it's possible. It's theoretically possible.
Yeah, and hopefully that program, I think that we come up together was kind of like a middle ground. It wasn't excessive amounts, but it was manageable, and it was trying to get you to do that distance. One thing I think just important to mention, Mark, and I think it's something that's maybe neglected across the board really, is with these endurance type sports, the importance of some pure speed work. So whether that's max speed work, even some hill work, or where you're actually, you don't tap in too much to the endurance side, but you're actually maximally trying to work that high end neuromuscular system, which we would say, and that would just make people more efficient. It would similar to the strength concept, you'd be able to recruit more motor units, etc. So that's something that can be added in potentially in warm-ups. To not be an extra session, I guess.
Yeah, I actually do a lot of hill work here, Ross, because I live beside the Dingle Way, which is a walkway, and actually there's quite a severe hill beside me. So it's 400 meters from my house, and I sprint. I do repeat sprints uphill, and I actually really enjoy it, and I feel it helps me to develop great strength as well as speed. And there's something magical about sprinting, because doing this kind of training and these kind of events, you never actually really get to open up unless you're okay towards the last 20 meters when you're trying to pass somebody out. But there's something magical and nearly childlike about sprinting as fast as you can. So I love that. I this one section of it is, I have it counted out, 160 meters, and I try to sprint. Now, obviously, I'm not sprinting as fast as Usain Bolt, but I'm doing something like 10, 12, and I build up every week the amount of sprints that I do. And it's something, it doesn't happen every week, but I try and come back to it. I really enjoy it. I think it's really, really important.
Yeah. Definitely working across that continuum of slowest type work all the way to the max sprint and stuff. It definitely adds some benefit, I think. Perfect. Thanks, Mark. Mark, just quickly, I don't want to keep you for too long. You've gave us such great insight around the triathlons. Could you just maybe give a little bit of advice for people for their initial steps if they did decide to take up the triathlons? I know we spoke a lot in detail about different things, but just some initial practical advice anyone wanting to do a triathlon start out for the first time.
Okay, I actually have a list here, Ross, and I just wrote out, I suppose the first thing I'd advise somebody is just get out and be active, whether it's, jogging, fast walking, and then developing on. I'd get a bike, and whether that means borrowing a bike or buying a bike, you don't have to buy a bike. Borrow a bike. Just make sure that it fits you, because if your saddle is too high, I found to my cost one time, I used the bike on a very long endurance thing that I certainly wasn't trained up for, and it was too high, and really 100 kilometers in, I was in bits. Make sure it's, if you're borrowing a bike, make sure it's from a friend who's the same size as you. I know it sounds, straightforward, but get a bike like that. Borrow a wetsuit from somebody who's roughly the same size as you. Wetsuits are designed to be tight, and they will let in, if you use them for the first time, you're in the sea, and all of a sudden you think, oh my God, what's that coldness in there? Some water has to go into your wetsuit, and that's funnily enough, it's actually going to keep you warm. So bike, wetsuit, make sure you have goggles that fit. Bring a spare tube, levers, and a little mini pump, or learn how to change a puncture. Make sure if on your bike, make sure you bring a water bottle, and make sure there's a cage, and you bring a water bottle and something like a gel or whatever, and make sure you've tried the gels, make sure you've tried the bars or whatever. Practice running off the bike. Like you're not cycling as if you're in the Tour de France. You're cycling just to finish some sort of a distance. So at some stage, just come home and change. 30 seconds later, just run off the bike. And even if you run 1K or 500 meters, you're training yourself to combat the effects of jelly legs. start your running a little slower and find out what's comfortable for you. Like the worst thing you can do is if you're practicing running that you start really fast and all of a sudden half a kilometer in you're out of breath and you can't continue and you're doubled over and maybe you're getting sick. Start slowly and get a little bit faster and finish faster. Practice brick sessions. So that's the bike and run. If you really want to buddy up, it's a nice thing to do is to have a friend who's doing it. Like, if you sign up for something and your friend has signed up for something, you're over and back to each other saying, oh, did you do the training last night? Or I'll meet you at 6 o'clock for the run or so. It's always really important. Now, obviously, we do an awful lot of virtual buddying up at the moment. And that in itself is really, really good thing to do. So find a friend, join a club if you can, get a plan, mix your training between morning and evening, kind of think about how you're going to get through something, like develop your mental resilience, come up with different tools that you can use. I will finish, I will get through, I will get through, I will get through, carry something with you. We can take it further and talk about heart rate zones and watches, and you can spend lots of money. And I'm hoping Kieran, who's the lovely boss of DSS, is going to fork out for a Garmin 935 for me. Just thought I'd put the plug in.
Yeah, wishful thinking.
Wishful thinking, yeah. He should be able to write off some tax, actually, if he buys it. I suppose the best advice is don't be a hero. Don't be trying to think, I'm going to be as good as somebody I know who's been on a podium or finished in the top 10 or as an age grouper. Like, it's all split into different age groups. So you can, depending on the older you are, the better chance you have of finishing on the podium in your age group. So that's the reason I'm continuing to do this, Ross. By the time I get to over 70, 75, I might actually finish on the podium if I'm still doing this. But don't be a hero. Like, don't try and hurt yourself. In the class I teach, I always say, like, it's perfectly fine to go to discomfort, but once you go towards pain, you have to stop. And it's the same doing any event, any of these endurance events, any of these triathlons. If you're in pain, don't continue. If your knee is coming against you, don't continue. If it's a little bit of a twinge, a muscle twinge, you'd probably be okay. If you have a cramp or something, you can manage it, but don't be a hero and hurt yourself, and enjoy it. Enjoy it. It's hugely enjoyable. You can talk about endorphins. I teach youngsters who are kind of living on the fringe of society and engaging in all kinds of risky behaviors. And I always tell them, lads, running and cycling and swimming, it's free drugs and they don't cause any damage to you, So enjoy yourself. Yeah, I think just get out, be active, buddy up, practice, don't be a hero, and get some basic equipment, borrow some basic equipment. And maybe you've just ticked the box to finish one event and you're done. You can say, yes, I've done it. And for the rest, you can tell your grandkids that you've done a triathlon and wow, it sounds fantastic. And you have photos to prove it. And actually they always give out medals, Ross, as well. When you do events, it's like for small children, everybody gets a medal and you also get a t-shirt, a training t-shirt. One of the materials wicks away the sweat and it has the name of the event and maybe sponsors and, it says triathlon, like 750k swim or 750 meter swim, bike, run, it looks good to wear it. So enjoy it. I think it's fantastic. It's a brilliant activity to do. And it's something you can continue because you don't have to be competitive. You're only competitive against yourself.
I think that's some fantastic advice, Mark. And are the t-shirts as good as the ones the boss got us that we're wearing right now?
No, these are the nicest t-shirts I've ever worn, Ross.
Just plug in for that Garmin. I like it. I had to put that in there. We've got the t-shirts on, so we're wearing our uniform. Mark, I just want to say a massive thank you to stuff you've given. I couldn't really add too much really from any angle. You've covered most bases, and a big thank you. I'm sure the members and all the listeners are going to get so much info around triathlon. And hopefully spark a bit of a surge of people starting and trying out. And maybe I'll take the leap out of the pool and go into the open water. Who knows?
Ross, as I've told you before, we have an airport that's near here. You can jump on your Ryanair plane, arrive here. There's loads of events here in County Kerry, so you're more than welcome. You'd probably beat me, so that's fine. I'm okay with that. I'm only against myself and you're against yourself.
You've got the nice bike now, so the mountain bike might not cut it, Mark. I'm not sure. Just to summarize a few things up. So on the website, obviously we've got the blog that's going out that you've written, that a lot of meat of the bones of what we spoke about today.
Yep.
We've got the programs in the endurance section that we kind of clapped on, and especially the triathlon one. You gave me lots of good info on that. And also you're going to be doing like some vlogs and video diary entries for your event coming up in
Yes, Ross. I think it's Sunday, the 4th of July in Rosslare. I'm going to do an Olympic triathlon. It's my first ever event in Wexford, actually, even though I'm from Wexford. I've done events all over the country, but never in County Wexford. So I'm really looking forward to it. I hope it takes place. I hope COVID doesn't cut across it. You know, the distance involved is a 1.5K swim in the sea, 40K bike, and 10K run. Now, the beauty of Rosslare is, firstly, the weather is usually good in the southeast in Ireland. Wexford is the sunny county and the model county, but it's also flat, and that's really important. And I think that's really going to help me. I think pretty much every event I've ever done anywhere, if you do them in Kerry, you're up and down on your bike, the same on the run. This is flat as a pancake, and I have tri-bars on my bike, and I will be on my tri-bars. So I'll be tucked into this position, and I hope to generate some fantastic speeds. And same on the run. I did a 10K actually in Rosslare a number of years ago. It was flat as a pancake. So I'm really looking forward to the event. I'm trying as much as possible to stick to a plan. And I think actually so far I'm more successful. I just got my first vaccine jab today. So I was due to do the class this evening, but I just thought when I talked to the boss, and we just kind of thought maybe it mightn't be the best idea, just let things settle. So I'm over this, and I'm training away, feel really strong and really good, touch wood, nothing happens. I'm managing my food a lot more. I'm even documenting my food. I do a lot of work with somebody Joe O'Connor, who is based in Tralee. He would have done fitness work with both Clare and Limerick when they won the All-Ireland. So Joe is a really, really top guy. So I've been training with him in the triathlon club, and also has his own fitness suite in our club inside in Tralee. So I feel good, I feel strong. I would like to document some of the training sessions, maybe a vlog or so every so often, just even to show where I am, and just after finishing a session and bathed in sweat, just to say, when I'm out of breath, this is what I've done, and this is how I found the last 2 weeks. So look, we'll see how it goes. It'd be amazing if there was an interest in triathlon, amazing if people were interested in more advice, were interested in plans, were interested in how my event, and again, it's not that I have a big ego or anything, it's just informative, just to let people know anybody can do this. Yeah. I'm, like I said a million times, I'm not on a podium, I'm in the middle of the field, but I finish, Yeah.
No, Mark, that's brilliant. And if you're not already a member, biggest incentive to see Mark's vlogs going up on the coaches WhatsApp group. So please head over to dailysportscience.com and have a look at what offers we've got going on. If you're not a member, we've got a surplus of 600 plus coaches now. So the community is booming, and no better time to get in now that the GA season's up and running and getting back to good. So brilliant. Mark, thank you so much for your time.
No problem, Ross.
Really appreciate it. Episode number 41, a different one, training the triathlon. You've been brilliant. And Thanks. Good luck with all your prep for the race.
Thank you very much, Ross. And I know you're a brilliant resource to have on the other end of a Zoom call, just to check in and see how things are going. So and we'll get you over here at some stage.
For sure. That is a promise at some point. I can't tell you when, but that is a promise.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Mark.
Thanks, Ross.